What is up, everybody? How y'all doing today? Hoping each and every single one of you is doing well. And welcome to today's Let's Appreciate. And today we will be appreciating LGR, Lazy Game Reviewers. Oh, Lazy Game Review. Alright, let's get some love to the chat first of all. Hello, Blazer. How you doing, man? What's up, Amy? How you doing, Mitch? Hello, Eugene Gilmer Jr. Of a name. Hey, Glitch Lord. What's up, Roxas? I hope you're all well today. Hey, Joster. Hey, Joster. God, it makes me feel like a fucking prick right now, considering I know what you've just been through. But would you be able to send us that Castle Crashers end scene today, man? So yes, today we'll be watching and appreciating some LGR. We're actually going to be watching 3 videos because, like, LGR does, like, different formats on his channel. Like, you have when he's building just some random crap that he wants to put together and finds it interesting, like old tech. What the hell was that? Good. Yeah, we're also going to be watching a review of his where he actually reviews something retro, Duke Nukem 3D, because it's actually, I believe it's actually his favorite game of all time, if not one of, probably top 5, maybe. Then we'll be watching him just do some random shit with Doom 3, which is something else he does, because he does some really weird, he does some out there things that are really fascinating. And then we're going to be capping it all off with a LGR Tech Tales, which is where he just deep dives into interesting technology or companies or software within technology, which is quite fascinating. But first, we're actually going to watch him build his dream Windows XP machine that he would have loved when he was a kid.
Greetings and welcome.
And he sounds like Dragon Slayer. Like, I'm fucking... He sounds a little like Dragon Slayer. Looks a little like him too.
To an LGR thing, and this is going to be a Windows XP thing. And today we're going to be building my ultimate Windows XP gaming PC from circa 2007-2008. Back then I built an XP gaming PC as well, but not only does it no longer exist, but that machine was never particularly great.
So yeah,
I mean, I had a budget of like $900 back then. I just couldn't afford the best hardware.
$900. $900. Like, could so, like, I want to know what... I want to know what the conversion rate... I want to know what the conversion rate of $900 early to mid-2000s would be today. Probably not that much, but you never fucking know. And only $900 to make a gaming PC.
But I still wanted to play the newest PC games, stuff like The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and of course, games like Crysis. As far as I'm concerned, Crysis signaled a turning point in
Windows
PC
XP.
gaming when it hit in
I
late
actually
2007,
got my first PC
acting as
with
a swan
Vista.
song for Windows XP and DirectX 9. And that's why I've chosen that time period, late 07, early 08, as a basis for all the parts for today's build. Not that it'll play Crysis maxed out or anything, but I want to see what it'd be like if money was no object for me building a PC back then. Cause yeah, while the parts I've picked are
Look at
cheap
that beautiful
nowadays,
fan.
when they were still new, they would have totaled over $3,500, as
$3.5 grand. Like, $3.5 grand. What you're about to see him build would have cost him $3.5 grand in the early to mid 2000s. Just think on that. And by the way, that fan right there, I'd still use that today.
you'll soon see. And admittedly, there are plenty of other ways to play mid-2000s PC games. Retrofitting a Pentium 4 or Athlon-based PC often works great, or you could even
actually
just take
have
a
that
modern
Crysis.
PC, fiddle with some
I
settings,
actually have a
and that'll run
physical
Need for Speed
copy of
Underground 2 or
Crysis.
Crysis better than a PC from 2007. But sometimes it just makes more sense, or it's more oddly enjoyable to play it on specific hardware, not deal with virtual machines or patches and updates to get them working on modern computers. I don't know. It's just something that I felt like doing. Let's get to it. So the first PC part from the pile of PC parts is the motherboard, and I'm going with an EVGA 122CK NF68B1.
Okay, so I'm going to be pausing a lot because obviously this is more of a reaction, but appreciation for this. Looking at that, what's so funny is, aside from the odd thing or two, it's insane how little motherboards have changed over the years. Like, they've removed and added a couple of things, like RAM has changed, because that's DDR2, by the way. DDR3 was the apple in the fucking tech eyes at this point, I believe. I don't think DDR3 was around at this point. That's DDR2, for fuck's sake. But, like, motherboards have not fucking changed much at all. Still using the same PCI slots and shit.
One of the 2007 revisions from EVGA's series of NF68 boards built around the NVIDIA Enforce 680i SLI chipset.
Rest in peace,
I remember
SLI.
reading about these 680i boards and being enamored not only with that beefy cooling setup piping between the north and south bridges, but the capabilities and benchmarks of the 680i chipset itself.
Can I get some F's in chat for SLI?
Stuff I'm looking for: SLI graphics card support, a couple extra PCI and PCI Express slots for expansion, and plenty of integrated components, including 6 USB 2.0 ports, dual.
Here's what's sad. Here is what's really fucking sad. What's really fucking sad is some modern fucking motherboards don't even have 6 fucking USBs. They only have like 4.
Gigabit Ethernet ports, and even a classy FireWire controller. And of course, being that this is an LGA 775 compatible mainboard, we'll need a CPU to match. And for that, I've chosen the venerable Intel Core 2 Extreme QX6850 running at 3 GHz. When this thing hit the market in summer of 2007, I was floored. Not only was it a quad-core CPU with higher clock and front-side bus speeds than its predecessor, the QX6800, but it was a little less costly as well. Not that it was cheap, though. The 6850 was still a $1,000 processor on launch, more than my entire budget for a PC in 2007.
Think about this. If I'm fucking certain, I don't even think the fucking Threadripper... I think the Threadripper costs $1,000. Like, today, the AMD Threadripper... Today, the fucking AMD Threadripper costs $1,000. Jesus.
And to cool off this beast, I'm going with one of the most absurd-looking coolers I remember seeing around that time, which is the Thermaltake Black Widow Spin Q. Just monstrous and overall
that thing
size,
is beautiful.
Really quiet with its
I
custom
would be
80mm
proud
fan
to have that in my
around
fucking
1,000
rig.
RPM, and I think it looks fantastic
1,000
as well,
RPM.
or at the very least eye-catching. To me, the Spin Q looks more like a turbocharger than a low-noise heatsink and fan combo. Next up is the memory situation, and I've chosen a pair of Corsair 1GB XMS2 6400 RAM sticks.
DDR2!
A version of the DDR800 RAM that I had on my actual Windows XP machine in 2008. So yeah, not the most RAM in the world back then, but 2 gigs certainly gets...
Yeah, 2 gigs! Think on that! Think on that. In, like, 16 years. In 16 years... Right, so we'll say this is 2000, probably about 2006 actually. So we'll say, 15 years. We'll say 15 years. 2 gigabytes would be enough back in 2005, 2006. Okay, 2 gigabytes would be enough to play most, if not all, fucking games like The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Okay, now we need like fucking double that DDR4. RAM. Jesus.
It's the job done for what I'm looking to accomplish. And that brings us to the graphics card, or graphics cards, rather. A pair of 320MB GeForce 8800 GTS Fatality Edition cards from XFX.
Right. It's interesting that he brings up It's interesting that he uses the Fatality ones. So, here's the thing. Fatality, for anybody who does not know, Fatality was big in the Unreal Tournament. I'm sure it was the Unreal Tournament scene in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, he was he was like what would be considered today as like an esports celebrity. Like, he was a fantastic Unreal Tournament player. Like I said, I can't remember if it was Unreal Tournament or Quake. Like, just a great fucking player. Like, so big that he literally had his own... They literally used him as the face of a brand of NVIDIA cards. Like, people like to think that esports is only just cropped up in the last couple of years. Esports has been around in some form or another since like the late 90s. It's just not as big as it is now. And interestingly, Fatality himself is actually going to feature in a future Let's Appreciate that I have planned.
While I do have a 768 megabyte 8800 Ultra, I thought
God,
about
look at
using,
all that.
which is a more powerful single card solution. I've just always wanted to see what could be done with two 320 meg GTS cards running in SLI. Next is a sound card classic, the Sound
Nobody
Blaster Audigy
fucking uses
Platinum.
sound cards
Even though the
anymore.
motherboard
Nobody.
has integrated audio,
I'm
I
pretty
really
fucking
wanted
sure.
dedicated sound hardware with EAX for this build. And while I'd prefer an Audigy 2ZS or an X-Fi card, I didn't have one on hand.
And there are going to be
And
young
yes,
people
this
who don't
also
even know what a
comes with
sound
an
card
awesome
is.
5¼ inch front audio panel, but I won't be using it right now due to the color scheme. If it was black instead of beige, I'd be all over it. Next is the optical media drive, and for that, I'm just going with this cheap LG DVD burner I found at Goodwill. Back in 2008, I actually had a Samsung LightScribe drive, but until I get another one of those, this will do just fine. And it uses a SATA interface, which is good because I'm avoiding all ribbon cables, including on this 160 gigabyte Western Digital Raptor hard drive. Actually, I have two of them because RAID, and because the idea of having dual 10,000 RPM hard drives seemed so wild to me back then that the dream stuck with me ever since.
10,000 RPM hard drives. Just fucking imagine how fast that shit was. But first of all, yes, fuck ribbon cables. You want to talk about one of the best advancements in PC technology? Getting rid of the fucking ribbon cables.
And of course, we'll need the operating system to stick on these, which will be Windows XP Professional version 2002. Naturally, though, I'm going to be patching and updating it with everything I can, including Service Pack 3 here. Did anyone else ever order Service Packs on disk from Microsoft back then? I sure did, mostly because my internet sucked. To power all this up, we'll need a pretty substantial power supply, and for that, I'm going with this 1000 watt semi-modular Rosewill power supply, the only component I bought brand new specifically for this build. Turns out finding new old stock 1000 watt PSUs isn't easy, and
Nice.
yeah, I just
And
feel
that's
more
overkill.
comfortable with something new anyway. I've never used a Rosewill PSU before, but I really wanted a 1000 watt unit, and this one had decent reviews and wasn't super costly, so I'm gonna give it a shot. And finally, there's the case, which is another Rosewill, coincidentally enough. This Striker M case was actually intended for another project that a friend and I were working on a couple years ago. That never came together, and since it was lying around in storage, I figured why not put it to good use. Even though it was
Like
manufactured
this.
in 2016, it still has a look to it that really feels like 2008 to me,
Okay,
and
first of all-
it's big enough inside to fit all the components we have while still hopefully having enough airflow. And let's be real, you can't do a late 2000s gaming PC without a clear side window and LED lighting. That is just a given.
Okay, so first of all, dude, you'd be surprised the amount of fucking infrastructure and companies that still fucking use Window XP. Like, no shit. That's not a joke. Like, a lot of fucking companies and a lot of like government-run things still run Windows XP. Like over here in the UK, the job center, where people looking for jobs go and get on the dole and shit like that. They still fucking use Windows XP. I fuck you not, they still do. Alright, second of all, he's not wrong. It's not a mid-2000s gaming PC unless it's got a clear side panel and LED. Kind of like today, it's kind of like today that it's not a gaming PC unless it's got a clear side and RGB. Oh, how things have changed so little.
Out of curiosity, I decided to add up all the suggested retail prices for these components when they were new, and wow, yeah, there is no way I'd have been able to afford this stuff new. Heck, it's a shocking sticker price even now. That's like $4,200 with inflation, so I'm pretty stoked to have gotten all this for roughly $200 over the past couple years. Alright, it's time to get this build going, starting with the processor. Simple enough stuff here, just unlatching the metal plating and dropping the QX6850 into the proper position.
That's not changed.
I'm going to use a little Arctic MX4 thermal
Arctic,
paste to get it ready
amazing
for that
thermal
massive
paste. I use
CPU
Arctic
cooler.
as well.
And while the cooler comes with a bunch of adapters for various setups, with an LGA 775 board, it's pretty darn straightforward.
Okay,
Screw in these two sets of clamps, then drop it into place over the CPU
fucking
and
hate
click each of the 4
Nvidia's
clamps
clips.
into place.
Okay, I kid you not. You see those fucking clamps that go into that into the fucking Intel sockets? Fuck those clamps, because sometimes they're the hardest things to get in when you got a big giant fuck off fan. Fuck the clamps sometimes. Damn.
And that's it. We'll get the fan plugged into the motherboard and then RAM installed in their appropriate slots for dual channel support. And oh yeah, looking good. No, seriously, it's looking good. Just check out that profile. I don't know, maybe you think it looks excessive or I should have used water cooling or whatever, but to me, there's something about vast rows of shiny metal fins and piping that never ceases to amuse. Next up is the case, which needs a little bit of preparation first. I got a little bag of goodies taped to the bottom here, and oh hey, it comes with a PC speaker. The motherboard has one already, but these are always quite handy, so I'll be holding on to that. Otherwise, yeah, just gotta screw in the appropriate offsets so we have somewhere to mount the motherboard, and we'll get the I/O panel plate clicked into place while we're at it. Alright, time to get this thing screwed in. And so far, I'm quite happy with the layout of this case. Plenty of room for activities, making it no problem at all to get the case fans plugged into the appropriate headers. Gonna go ahead and install one of the GPUs too, but only one of them since I'll leave the SLI set up for later. Right now, I just want to get the basic stuff installed so we can make sure it moves properly, with the final thing being the power supply down here. Got the main line going to the motherboard, another going to the graphics card, and then we've got this that powers the CPU, and
yeah.
Well, crap, I did not even think to look where this goes. Turns out it connects right beside the CPU underneath that massive cooling assembly.
Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? If you know anything about building PCs, any at all, you would know the fact that this is something that has not changed at all either. Even to this day, they still make the wires so fucking small. Like, they just do not fucking reach. Like, they allow you to go to the back of the PC for a goddamn reason, is to tidy up wiring. But they make the wires so fucking small that you can't thread them through sometimes, especially that bastard, the fucking CPU power.
This was not fun. I had to either remove the spin queue entirely or take off the top of the case, so I decided on the latter. Thankfully, I was able to get the top lifted off
that's the most annoying one to get in.
Without taking apart the
CPU
whole
power is
case,
the hardest one.
Even then, it was a tight fit due to that friggin' heatsink. Oh well, nice opportunity to see the other side of the case, which we'll definitely be utilizing for some cable management. I like that little 2.5-inch tray tucked away in there too. Maybe I'll add an SSD sometime. Alrighty, let's get this thing powered on, and fingers crossed everything's working so far and we can continue the build. I'm going to be using a 16:9 monitor throughout the rest of this video, by the way, though I was using a 1610 panel back in 2008, so that'd probably be more appropriate. Anyway, let's power it on for the first time, and... Welp, that's not good. Thankfully, it has this little green LCD panel on the motherboard, which stops on C1.
I wish more. Yeah,
that's a memory detection issue according to the EVGA website. So
I wish more had those.
And see what happens.
More motherboards need those.
That fixed it. The first gigabyte of RAM was fine, but the second wouldn't post at all. So yeah, I guess we'll just move forward with half the RAM till I can get a replacement.
I wish more motherboards
Next up,
had those
10,000
indicators.
RPM hard disks installed, and
that were
here's
more
another reason I
clear.
wanted to use this case I had. Toolless drive mounting. Just remove this tray, clip the hard drive into place.
But yeah, they have the
slide it
lights.
back in there.
They have the lights, but they can be sometimes hard to see.
Like
I prefer the LED light.
That these are such high-speed spinning platters, but we'll see. For now, I'm just going to start winding power and data cables throughout the case, starting with this 4-pin Molex connector that goes into the motherboard for powering the SLI setup. And we'll go ahead and plop the second GPU in here, along with its own PCI Express power cable. Then the sound card, which due to space is going to go right between the two graphics cards. Thankfully, it's short enough that it's not blocking the fans. And finally, the SLI
Hey, press F in chat for my RAM, because when I was rebuilding my PCs, one of my RAM sticks fried.
Gotta get the DVD-RW going, and to do that, we actually have to remove the entire front of the case. It just kind of rips off of there with a bit of force, which felt chaotic to me, but that's what the manual said to do. Anyway, this is a screwless design as well, so it just clips in there snugly, ready for some cableage. And yeah, there's a whole mess of stuff around the side now.
That ain't got shit on my gaming PC.
Modular PSU, each of the modules are ridiculously long and packed with more connections than I actually need. So we're just gonna pack it all in there.
So now I only have 2 sticks of RAM.
So let's get the other panel in place and remove that plastic. Whoops, I had some on the other side too. There we go. Now that is looking sleek.
Damn, that looks good.
On to the software side of things now, starting with the RAID configuration. For what I want to do, I'm looking at 2 main options: striped, known as RAID 0, and mirrored, known as RAID 1. And while RAID 1 is safer, being that it mirrors the discs, I'm going to roll the dice and go with striped.
Yes, it is. It is meant to be a early, mid-2000s gaming PC.
Drives, I'm fine with the risk. Plus, I get the full 300 gigs of storage and hopefully a bit more speed this way. Finally, it's time to get Windows XP installed on our new healthy RAID array, which went absolutely swimmingly.
I don't run RAID.
Until
I need to look
didn't.
into it.
Yeah, blue screen of death during Windows setup is never fun. Now, I figured I just needed to install the NVIDIA RAID drivers, but in order to do that, they needed to be in a floppy disk. But I don't have a floppy drive installed here, and I really don't want to bother with one, so I just went with a tried and true method, Enlight. I used to use this all the time to make custom Windows configurations. Basically, this just takes the XP setup files and customizes them with whatever you need. So I added the RAID drivers to this, made myself a custom ISO, burned it onto the disk, and presto, no more BSOD, only smooth sailing from here on out. Ooh, look, an exciting new look. How exciting. I love the Windows XP setup for some reason, with its cheerful bright blue interface.
I got into
and chillax
PC
soundtrack.
gaming hardcore at the wrong time, clearly. Like, clearly.
At this point, it's just a bunch of driver installation, so I'm not going to show that whole routine, being that it's, routine. Suffice to say that it went well, though, no problems encountered. Detected both cards straight away, eventually providing this pop-up letting me know an SLI setup was detected.
Nice.
The NVIDIA control panel lets you enable that with a simple software switch, and bam!
It annoys
dual
me that
GPUs at the ready. So let's get to some gaming, dang it.
SLI.
Starting
really
with
does.
a mid-2000s classic, The Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Ah, that theme! Yeah, keep in mind what he's using. The results might surprise you.
Some gratifying stuff. Back when I first got Oblivion, my PC was hot garbage. I had a hand-me-down HP Pavilion from 2003 with like a roll of toilet paper for a video card. It didn't run Oblivion hardly at all, but I played the crap out of it anyway. And now, seeing what it would have been like running on a monster machine from around that time period, yeah, look at me now, past me. I've got 2 video cards and a stupidly fast CPU and dual Western Digital Raptors. Suck it. Needless to say, Oblivion runs pretty great. At the moment, I'm running it on the high preset with no anti-aliasing or VSync and a resolution of 1280 by 720. So that's a resolution that was pretty typical for the time period, and even though there's screen tearing, having VSync turned off lets us see how high we can go in terms of unlocked frame rate. I'll be using these same settings, or as close as I can get to them for the rest of the games I'll be testing too, and I'm using the program Fraps to show the FPS in the top left corner there. Beautiful. So yeah, Oblivion drops below 60 FPS when a lot of crap is going on in the open world, but there are plenty of areas where it runs well above that. And loading is an absolute breeze with this, and everything else I tested for that matter, with much of that thanks to those speedy Raptor hard drives. Just awesome. Next up, we've got to test the big one, Crysis, which can bring a far more capable system to its knees with no problem, so I'm quite curious.
Still can bring many PCs to its knees with the remaster.
Gives you an idea of how it runs, which for the most part falls between 30 and 50 FPS. This is on medium 720p settings across the board, by the way. But even on high, it achieved similar results.
Ain't that the true glitch?
There's some major slowdown on loading new areas and effects, which is disappointing, but maybe that's because I'm only running 1 gig of RAM. Though, from what I've read, it doesn't seem SLI really helps Crysis out too much.
Actually, it's more of a detriment.
And in fact, it seems to cause some weird issues. Check out the foliage, for instance. It's all flickery and glitched out. This is running the latest patch, though, and it seemed I got better results after downgrading the NVIDIA drivers and running an older version of the game, which is what you're seeing here, running on the high graphics setting. But yeah, no matter what, it still had issues rendering stuff. Everything from foliage to character models to vehicle tires that would appear and disappear seemingly at random.
Beautiful.
I'm betting that 8800 Ultra card I've got would be a better choice here. Oh well, moving on to something I know will work just fine, and that is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I wasn't able to get this working in proper widescreen, kept crashing the game, so it's playing here at 1280 by 960.
Yay.
And yeah, it runs stupidly well with the frame limiter
That's why you use a
turned off,
widescreen mod.
only dipping below 200 FPS here and there. No surprise though, this is a game from 2002 and doesn't demand much at all from PC hardware of the mid-2000s, but it's an absolute must-have for a Windows XP PC, so I couldn't resist.
Damn
Well,
right.
let's give a simulation game a shot with SimCity 4 Deluxe from 2003. Although it kinda looks like it's using isometric 2D imagery, it's actually using a 3D game engine from a fixed perspective, with a lot of complex systems underneath that. And playing larger cities can be quite taxing on a CPU. As a result, it runs about as well as one can hope.
Almost
with
frame
wildly
rate.
varying
Look at that.
frame rates depending on
That
what's
was
being loaded
almost
at
a
the time,
slideshow.
maxing out at 60 due to the game's settings. Still, this runs 1,000 times better than my PC of the time did, even in 2008, so yeah, good stuff. Alright, next up we've got Monolith's Fear from 2005, a game that not only impressed in terms of gameplay, but was next level with its shading and physics. Running the
And
graphical
AI.
benchmark, you can see why with its crazy particle effects and lighting. I think this still looks pretty awesome even today. It dipped down to 39 FPS at one point, but for the most part it's in the mid 50 FPS range, or higher, at maximum
This was a
settings.
joy to let's
Wow,
play.
I forgot how much I enjoyed playing this. It's been ages since I last dipped my toes into this one. Definitely got to review
Makes the
this at some
fucking run
point. I
sometimes.
loved this
Or
game,
get
and now I
running.
just want to play all afternoon. But alas, must move on to another great game. Need for Speed Underground 2. While it wasn't my favorite at the time,
God, I
I've got to
used to play
say
the
this
hell out of
racer
this on
from
PS2.
2004 has grown
This
on me quite a
Most
lot over the
Wanted in
years.
Carbon.
It was the first NFS game to provide an open world and was by far the most graphically impressive to date, with an unprecedented amount of car customization for the series on top of that. And
Should
yeah,
get
it
to
runs
Let's
pretty
Play those
fantastically on
sometime.
max settings, hanging around the 70 FPS mark for the most part, and occasionally dropping to the 40s when it hits a tricky track section. Still though, super playable, and far beyond anything I experienced when I was playing on my PC back then. What an awesome game. Speaking of awesome, let's get into some Unreal Tournament. UT 2004 to be exact, with its legendary Unreal Engine 2.5. And I always loved maxing out the graphics because whenever you do,
Fucking
and
love
no
that.
big shock whatsoever. The game runs flawlessly.
I want
This
another
was quite
Unreal
well optimized
Tournament.
to begin with, but on a PC like this, there's nothing stopping it from running
feel
at
like
well
we
over
could do
100
with an
FPS
Unreal
at all
Tournament.
times. Once again, I forgot how much I enjoyed this game. It's been far too long since I've played it, but it all came back to me in an instant. That's really why I wanted to make this machine, to revisit games I hadn't in years, either because they're tricky to run on modern hardware or because it just doesn't quite feel the same playing on a modern PC. Compatibility modes and patches are nice and all, but there's something genuinely special about playing games on hardware closer to when they launched. I don't know, it's an arbitrary thing, but to me there's a notable difference in how it feels to play. Even 3D Pinball Space Cadet feels more appropriate
That's
than an actual
nostalgic
Windows
as
XP
fuck.
machine. If anything, it's consistently amusing to play such a simple little game on a build that would have cost like $4 grand when it was new. Its relatively high specifications also mean that this makes for a pretty good emulation rig too, with things like DOSBox being no problem at all, and even with more advanced DOS games like Duke Nukem 3D. Sure, you can do this just as easily on a modern PC, but it's actually kinda nice to have such great emulation options on a slightly older computer if you ask me. And
What
that
is
is
this?
it for my dream Windows XP PC from circa 2007, 2008. Man, I don't know about you, but I am pleased as balls over this thing. It looks great, it plays great, and it has a nice set of upgrade options if I choose to do so in the future. And I absolutely do. Let me tell you, this is not the last time you'll be seeing this thing on LGR. In fact, I've already made a few changes since I originally filmed this. For one thing, I added 2 of these 120mm Corsair cooling fans to the top of the case, as well as one more along the bottom, because this thing runs hot. It's like a space heater inside, so the increased airflow helped a lot. I also grabbed another 2GB RAM kit, same one I had before,
Beautiful.
except this time all the sticks work. So now I have 3 gigs of RAM installed, which on this 32-bit version of Windows leaves me with 2.5 gigabytes, a welcome and notable improvement. And then there's the front panel USB ports, which I didn't even think about while building it, but they're USB 3.0 and the motherboard only had a header for 2.0. So I dropped in a cheap USB 3 controller card inside, and now I have working USB ports on the front of the case that are faster than what's on the motherboard itself.
Isn't that mad? Isn't that fucking insane? That if you look in the right places, you can find cards like that for old tech. Cards that allow you to run USB 3 directly through the motherboard in a PCI slot.
About the only other thing I want to do is upgrade the sound card because the Audigy that's in here doesn't have an HD audio header, and really I just want something newer anyway. But yeah, that'll be for another time. As for today, I hope you enjoyed seeing this come together even half as much as I enjoyed building it. This was more fun than I even thought it'd be. If you'd like to see other build videos, definitely check these out or stick around. I make new videos on all sorts of retro tech and games every week here on LGR. And as always, thank you very much for watching.
Like there are, speaking of the Fred Ripper, there are people out there who make custom boards for old school, for really old DOS CPUs, and like even older than that, with modern technology. It's fucking incredible once you deep dive into this. Okay, now, it was ironic that someone mentioned Doom 3 because, well, let's watch Doom 3, or the Switch version of Doom 3, as I like to jokingly call it.
Greetings and welcome to an LGR thing, and today we're trying something a little bit absurd with Windows 98 and this 12MB Voodoo 2 accelerator card from 1998. We're going to be playing Doom 3 from 2004. This was absolutely not supported natively. At minimum, it required a 64MB GPU and Windows 2000 or XP, but I remember seeing posts about this Voodoo 2 Windows 98 mod back in the day and always wanted to try it. I'm going to go ahead and show each step of the process to setting this up, but I'll also provide typed instructions and links to the files used in the video description, so if you want to just see the resulting gameplay, feel free to skip ahead.
Now, let's remember, Voodoo, if you're not familiar with Voodoo cards, that Voodoo were the first 3D accelerator cards ever produced. Some of the earliest ones, okay? Like, these were the ones that Nvidia and shit licensed out to make graphics cards. Like, they're what you would pair with a 2D graphics card to be able to run 3D games.
As for the rest of you, well, let's...
Wait, hold on. Running games with below... Dude, this ain't even below. This is a card from the late 90s. Like, I'm pretty sure the Voodoo accelerator that he's using is from the late 90s. That shit ain't even on the recommended. That ain't even below the recommended. That's like, if this is the top of the fucking iceberg and you can't see it, but where this ranks, if this is the minimum, if this is the bar of the minimum, what he's going to be running this on is all the way down in the fucking core of the earth.
Get the lazy green giants set up to do this thing. I usually have a Voodoo 3 in here, but today I'll be dropping in this lovely STB Blackmagic Voodoo 2.
1 minute. Look, that fucking card's only running 12MB of onboard memory. I'm fucking curious, when the fuck did that card come out? Well, apparently, according to CNET, the gender of this is female. I didn't even realize I needed to know the gender of the card. 1 second. I need to know when this released. I need to know when this card fucking released. Right, the Voodoo 2. But February 1998. This card is from fucking 1998. Or shortly after.
Card, which was actually my first 3D accelerator back in the day. And since this only does 3D and doesn't do
and this is going to be running on Windows 98.
I'm going to pair it with this 4MB ATI 3D Rage Pro card from 1997. Just gonna stick them into their respective PCI 2.0
Again, it's
slots
insane
right
what
next
people
to each
can
other,
do.
since around back they need to be connected with this little SVGA cable in order for the graphics cards to work together. I'll just be using the latest reference drivers for each card in Windows 98 2nd Edition, nothing special in that regard. As for Doom 3, the installer will immediately throw up a message about Windows 98 not being supported, but just click through and let it happen. And do note that you will need to use the original retail release of Doom 3. The BFG re-release won't work at all, and the Steam version relies on protection that isn't compatible with Windows 98.
I actually
also,
have the
may
original
ask about
PC
updating
release.
to DirectX version 9.0b, and if you don't have it, then install it, or even better, install 9.0c like I did here. Once your system restarts, you'll need to update Doom 3 to version 1.31, and I found I get the best results by updating to 1.1, then 1.3, then 1.31. Each of these are included in the D3 patch folder in the archive I've put together for this video, no need to worry about hunting down any of these. Next, navigate to the Doom 3 V2 patch folder in the archive and open the executable there. First thing it presents is a list of Doom 3 pack files to extract before running the patch, so you'll need an extraction program like WinRAR or 7-zip to get into these. Navigate to the Doom 3/base folder and open up pack 000, pack 002, and pack 004.pk4. Then just extract the required folders into the same base folder you found the pack files. So by the end you should have folders in there titled Materials, GUIs, Particles, Textures, and Models. Head back to the patch program and we can adjust the texture sizes, and while the default settings will work just fine on a Voodoo 2, I was curious to see how low it could go, so I chose the minimum settings. And also make sure the two checkboxes at the bottom are checked, at least for the kind of setup in this video, and
Glitch, what you're about to see goes way beyond what you're talking about. You'll see.
Finally click Run and let it do its thing. This can take quite some time. It may even look like it's frozen for a while, but yeah, it'll eventually get there. What it's doing is going through each of these files you extracted and converting them into much lower fidelity versions that can be displayed on a Voodoo card, as well as popping down some modified executables and config files, so Doom 3 won't refuse to run on such a low-spec system. After 10 or 15 minutes, head back to the archive and the OpenGL32 folder, then copy over the DLL file to the main Doom 3 directory, right alongside the main executables for the game. And now, it's time to see if it worked. Open doom3_v2.bat, and if all went well, you'll see a 3DFX logo on startup. Oh yeah! The intro videos didn't work for me, so you can just press escape to get past those, and finally, we're in the main menu. Still not ready to play the game itself though, just go into the options and crank things down as low as they'll go, save, then quit the game. We should now have a config file in the base folder, so go ahead and open that in a text editor and add the line set_AR_light0 right below the final set_AR line in that file, then save and make it read-only. You may be tempted to skip this step and see how it goes without it, but trust me, it's worth it for the performance and aesthetic enhancements. Once you get Doom 3 opened up again, start a new game and see if it works. If not, and you get this empty window here, I've got a fix for that too. Back in the archive, there's a save game folder. Just copy that entire thing into the same Doom 3 base folder we've been using, then go back into the game and you'll have an autosave. Load that and bam, it skips that glitch and gets you into the game. Finally,
are you guys ready for the majesty that is Doom 3 running on a 1998 machine?
Welcome to Mars. All new arrivals need to check in at reception.
Yeah, such as it is.
They didn't They didn't just lower the textures. They changed the textures so much. They lowered the resolution of every single goddamn texture in this game. So it will run on a Voodoo 3.
But I mean,
and this is the
this
result.
Is a 12 MB card running on an unsupported operating system. It's not that bad. And sure, you don't have like any of the graphical features that made Doom 3 such an impressive technical achievement, but at the same time, I think it's oddly charming. It looks kind of like a prototype or something. It looks better than some
okay,
modern
now Glitch,
early
that's
access
just
games
wrong
I've
because
seen
it
on
doesn't.
Steam, which
I love
is
Half-Life
actually
2 on
kinda sad.
PS2. I love
in
Half-Life
case you
on
forgot
PS2.
what it was
Thank you very
supposed to
much.
look like, here's the game running on Ultra on a PC that legitimately supports it.
Okay, there's a few things we need to take care of first.
Potato Doom
This
3,
is your
Ultra
personal
Doom
data
3.
assistant. You'll need this to access all secure areas. If you get clearance for any security zones, it'll download directly. It's important, so don't lose it.
Tell me, Dr. Betruger, why are so many workers spooked, complaining, requesting transfers off Mars?
They simply can't handle life here. They're exhausted and overworked. If I had a larger, more competent staff and bigger budget, even these few accidents...
The fuck happened to Betruger?
Okay, so the character models are straight up horrific and or amazing, depending on where you stand. And the texture resolution and model
fucking
complexity
love
is
this.
drastically reduced all around, but it's still unmistakably
Okay, now
Doom
I will
3.
agree with that.
You even still
It looks
get
like
the
Red Faction
interactive
on low
user
settings on
interfaces found on
PC.
displays and panels throughout the game. The patch doesn't seem to touch these at all, which is good because they're rather necessary to the gameplay. Speaking of which, Doom 3 remains rather playable, if understandably choppy. And hey, you don't have to worry about swapping flashlights anymore, bonus. But yeah, even when the action heats up and things slow down, the controls remain responsive-ish, and the FPS doesn't tank as much as I anticipated. Part of that undoubtedly has to do with the 1 GHz Pentium
No
3
more
CPU
flashlight.
in this system, but still, even that is a generation behind and much slower than the 1.5 GHz Pentium 4 that Doom 3 lists as its minimum supported processor.
I'm good, Tyrone.
So all things considered, even though it can dip into single-digit frame rates
Single
when you're
digit,
up against
bitch! That's a
multiple
fucking
enemies,
pop-
I still think
that's a
this is holding
PowerPoint.
up surprisingly decently. I mean, I'm not gonna recommend actually playing the game this way, holy crap, no, this is awful, but it's an absurd, charming kind of awful that only comes from purposely breaking PC games to run on configurations that they were never ever meant to. Oh, and in case you're wondering if it'll work with an even older Voodoo 1 card, I wasn't able to get that going at all with this 4 MB Diamond Monster 3D.
4
The patch
megabyte.
technically supports it, but the game itself crapped out every time I loaded it, even with alternate Wicked GL libraries installed. Oh well. That's about it for this video. I just wanted to share this weirdness since I got a kick out of it. Ever since I saw the posts on
Look at the fucking machine gun ammo count texture. Look at that texture. That is godlike. Oh, that is beautiful, isn't it?
gaming forums 14 or so years ago, I always wanted to try this out. But by 2004, I'd moved on from Voodoo graphics cards and gotten myself an ATI Radeon 9800 series board. It didn't run Doom 3 perfectly either, but hey, at least it was capable of taking care of business on its own. Dang, the 9800 Pro, now that's a card I haven't experienced in ages. But anyway, before I get myself distracted with questionable eBay searches, I'm gonna go and say that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this little dive into some silliness. I do not in any way recommend doing this unless you're bored and have some old hardware lying around, and in that case, do check out the video description for all the files. And check back for more LGR as well. There are new videos every week. And as always, thank you very much for watching.
It's a thing of beauty, isn't it? It's a fucking thing of beauty.
Duke Nukem 3D. What?
I will say this about LGR. I will say this right the fuck now. He has one of the closest Duke Nukem impersonations I fucking heard. If anybody was working on a knockoff project, okay, I mean this in the kindest way possible. If anybody was working on a knockoff Duke Nukem project and needed a Duke Nukem impersonator, they'd need to get in contact with LGR because holy crap is he good.
Duke Nukem 3D. What a phenomenal game. Developed and published by 3D Realms and distributed by FormGen in 1996 for MS-DOS PCs, followed by an endless supply of ports, spin-offs, and re-releases ever since. In my eyes, this is a contender for the best PC game of all time, so where do I even begin?
Yeah, he loves
Well, let's
Duke.
just start with the box art designed by Robert Grace, which is intentionally reminiscent of the movie poster for Army of Darkness, providing the first clue as to the pop culture the developers were smoking at the time. Make no mistake, Duke Nukem
pop
3D
culture
is a
they were
parody of
smoking
all
at the
things
time.
action movie. In previous games, Duke was just a generic, self-absorbed tough guy with a gun, but now he was the Ray-Ban-clad amalgam of Bruce Campbell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood, and Roddy Piper. Inside the box, you got the game itself on an atomic yellow CD-ROM, a timeless 3D
I
Realms
miss CDs like
registration
that.
card, an ad for the 10 multiplayer network in the form of a drink coaster, a high-quality mouse pad of the game's cover art, and a jewel case manual filled with plenty of information on
LGR
everything
agrees
from
with you,
guns
Lord.
to bad guys to the AOL keywords to guide you as you surf the World Wide Web for 3D Realms. It also has this picture of the development team, including Duke Nukem himself, which I guess means that Duke is partially responsible for his own existence and is the result of a predestination paradox. I've got causality loops of steel. Starting up the game presents the classic nuke symbol and a thundering explosion that just gets the testosterone flowing already. Then each word of the title pops up faster than my erection, accompanied by the
God,
rockin' grab bag theme song by Lee Jackson. Once you've reached the main menu, checking the help section will give you the story thus far, which basically says that while defeating the aliens in Duke Nukem 2, more aliens came to Earth and moved in without even paying a security deposit. Duke's ship is shot down and he's pissed. So start a new game and choose your difficulty. Yeah, piece of cake. Let's rock. Come get some. Or, damn, I'm good.
Again, just hear LGR say out the title, the difficulty selection. He has got that fucking voice down well.
So, start a new game and choose your difficulty. Yeah, piece of cake. Let's rock. Come get some. Or, damn, I'm good. Damn, those alien bastards are gonna pay for shooting down my ride. And that's how Duke Nukem 3D begins. Profanity, explosions, knuckle cracking,
Thanks,
and
Randy.
guns blazing. Perfect. From here, the
Fuck
premise
Randy
is
Pitchford.
straightforward. Get to the end of the level by way of shooting stuff, solving simple puzzles, and collecting key cards. If you've played Doom or, well, any other first-person shooter in the last 20 years, it seems downright formulaic. But what sets Duke apart are the multiple layers of awesome happening on top of the basic FPS formula. Let's start with the weapons. These go beyond the typical melee, pistol, shotgun, machine gun, and rocket launcher loadout of similar games of the time. You do have those, of course, and they all feel absolutely incredible to use, I might
Beautiful.
add. But in addition, you've got remote detonated pipe bombs, laser trip mines, a rapid-firing mini nuke launcher, a freeze thrower, and even a shrink ray.
I think this was,
Each of these feel distinct and are acquired in
I'm sure this
thoughtfully
came out
selected
before Shadow
spots
Warrior
throughout the
Rise of the
story,
Triads.
so that you're left feeling satisfied with each of them. Just be careful that you don't accidentally shrink or freeze yourself or set off one of the explosives too close, because they're just as powerful against you as they are your enemies. The next aspect that gave Duke Nukem 3D its unique feel is the level design, which is complex without being too overwhelming. The whole game is
How is he
divided up into
standing?
3 episodes, with between 5 and 10 levels each, and some secret levels on top of that. Each level feels refreshingly distinct from
How
the
the fuck
others,
does he stand
with
doing
everything
that?
from prison facilities
like the
to
Liu Kang
strip
bicycle
clubs to
kit.
alien moon bases. The layouts can be intimidatingly sprawling, even using the overhead map. Rarely does it feel like you're being pushed down a corridor towards the end. Instead, you're given free rein to explore and progress at your own pace, all while running across tons of secret places and Easter eggs. The main thing that occasionally lets this down is the copious usage of key cards, which is something relied on so often in shooters back then that has become a joke over the years.
Now we're back to
looking
that.
for the same blue, red, and yellow key cards and their associated doors in nearly every single level, it's not always the most engaging thing to do. Thankfully, Duke runs at the speed of a doped-up cheetah, and even faster when he's doped up himself. Steroids are one of the special items you'll come across, which makes Duke bolt around like lightning.
There's only one version.
Kick with the force of a Mack truck.
There's only one version.
There's also the jetpack, which is used for freely wandering the level and finding even more secrets. Medkits to restore your
Meltdown
perfect physique.
I would recommend, and that's the okay. Right, so unfortunately now there's only ever one version of this, and that's the World Tour Edition. But if you can find a copy of the Atomic Edition or even the Meltdown Edition, those are the two versions I would recommend.
Protective boots and scuba gear for dealing with hazardous floors and underwater areas.
But unfortunately, World Tour is the only version around.
Exactly
Thanks, Randy!
Night vision, but instead make enemies and hidden messages glow green. Then there's the Hollow Duke, and it doesn't have a whole lot of use in the single-player campaign.
No, but they made it worth
shit
shitting fucking forever now.
To fool enemies, but most of the time they'll just ignore it and shoot you anyway, so it's best used against much more gullible human beings. You're much better off spending your time learning each enemy's quirks. And this
the Megaton
is
Edition,
that's it.
I have the
Duke apart.
Megaton Edition on Steam.
The jetpack-wielding assault troopers, or lizard troopers as I always called them, will sometimes appear to die while choking on their own blood, which in and of itself is another cool feature.
Randy, if she sits on a posse to
be
pee, she's
faking
not
it
too
and
young
pop
for
back
me,
up to shoot you in
Pitchford.
the back, so it's best to blow up their corpse as a precaution. Others will teleport away from the action and try to get the jump on you from behind later on, the backstabbing punks. Then you've got the pig cops, which, cops are also called pigs, get it? Anyway, if you don't turn them into bacon bits first, they'll wander around on foot and shotgun you in the face, while others will take to the sky and recon patrol vehicles to go all danger zone on you. Octobrains follow soon after, and these monstrosities freaked me out as a kid. Toothy floating brains with tentacles and the ability to blast you with lethal energy, and oh so satisfying to kill and watch them deflate into a bloody pile of gray matter. The Protozoid Slimers are your token alien facehugger ripoffs with egg pods that they hatch from before attaching themselves to your face and sucking out your brains. They also highly resemble the sentient goo enemies from Duke Nukem 2, and this makes me happy. Enforcers are total jerks and jump around shooting you with automatic chain gun fire, and by the way, the bullet weapons are all hit scans, so good luck getting out of the way. Assault commanders, or fat commanders, are rotund creatures that fire rockets out of their butthole. Yep. Sentry drones are the most annoying things ever. They're just robotic kamikaze douchebags that inflict tons of damage and have tons of armor. And beyond a few other minor things like sharks and turret guns, the rest of the enemies are bosses found at the end of each episode. The first of which,
only thing about World Tour that's worth it is the fact that they got a new episode created by the original developers.
Baddest one that you come across at the end of episode 1. You've also got the Overlord at the Moon Base at the end of episode 2, and the Cycloid Emperor at the LA Football Stadium Showdown in episode 3. With each episode, you get a short pre-rendered cutscene, usually with Duke saying and doing something absurd and or lewd. Pure campiness. I love it. The whole game could be completed in about 6 or 7 hours if you know what you're doing, but it's well worth it to take your time and admire the scenery. You can explore movie theaters, restaurants, hotels, subway stations, desert temples, and even strip clubs, which was a far cry from what other first-person shooters were doing in '96.
Interesting note. Interesting thing for everybody to note. The build engine, the engine that this game runs on, is still used today. I'm not kidding. I believe the game was called Ion Fury, came out last year. I believe it was last year. Runs on this fucking engine. It's ridiculous.
Of course, you also have a ton of sci-fi themed levels that look like a mix between Star Trek and Aliens, especially in Episode 2, but it was the more realistic levels in Episodes 1 and 3 that really drew me in, largely because they were so believable. Plus, they were all chock full of pop culture references, from current events, to movies, to music, to other games being constantly lampooned and alluded
Wait,
to.
the Atomic Edition is on the
That's
Epic
one
Store?
doomed Space Marine.
They were also hugely interactive, and this was probably the most impressive thing to me of all. Small things like being able to leave bullet holes on solid surfaces or shooting aliens and watching their blood streak down the wall behind them may seem insignificant now, but it was incredibly novel then. And the details didn't stop there. You could open lifelike doors and toggle light switches, rifle through cabinets, pee in toilets, and then drink from them for health, blow apart walls and detonate entire buildings, play a game of pool, break TVs and electronics, spy on distant locations through security camera feeds, and yes, you can even tip strippers. In fact, the women are the only humans you come across in the game, and most of them have been bound, stripped, and controlled by the aliens in some way.
Oh, Lord.
Naturally, this was a topic of controversy in 1996, alongside the game's profanity and gory violence.
Oh,
it even led to the game being outright...
Doesn't that sound fucking familiar? Doesn't that sound fucking familiar with what happened with Duke Nukem Forever? I'm not saying...
banned in several countries, as well as stores like Walmart in the USA selling their own censored version of the game. Granted, you could always censor it yourself with the included parental lock option, but I guess it made certain people feel better to have it removed entirely. But I can't knock the option too hard, really, since it was understandably the only way my parents let me play the game when I was 12 years old. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, the content only seemed to help sales rather than hinder them, and subsequent Duke Nukem games capitalized on this even more. But I've gotta say, the controversy is never what kept me interested, because the biggest thing that kept me playing was the ability to mod the crap out of it. You see, on the game CD in a special folder, there was a full set of editing tools. These were the same ones used by 3D Realms to develop the game, so really, you had the ability to make an entire new game out of this if you wanted to. I was one of those people, and I could not get enough of it. I had the official Duke Nukem 3D level design handbook, and I read it cover to cover countless times.
Man, imagine game developers doing that now.
Houses, the local library, my mom's office, just whatever I could think of. And then I'd upload it to the AOL Games channel while downloading hundreds of other people's work after that. You could even edit the included con files, which acted as liaisons between modders and the more complex code under the hood. Using any text editor, you could easily manipulate everything from the aliens to individual objects. It was such a cool feature. It was my first introduction to a vibrant modding community, and it's one that is still going strong to this day.
Oh yeah, it is.
Quite simply, if it weren't for Duke 3D, I don't know if I would have the same interests and skills that I do now, and it all has to do with 3D Realms including those tools on the disc. And if you really wanted something a little more professionally made, 3D Realms had you covered there too. They released the Plutonium pack later in '96, which was a hefty patch sold in its own box that upgraded the game to the Atomic Edition version 1.4.
There it is.
After this, they bundled the game together as the Atomic Edition version 1.5, which was...
Okay.
They bundled the game...
One of the best fucking redesigns of the front of the first box art, in my opinion. Fucking we'll hash it out on the street if you fucking disagree. I fucking love that. I love the X-ray effect and the shininess of it.
Together as the Atomic Edition version 1.5, which was a standalone game with the latest patches and the Plutonium pack installed. It also came in this incredible holofoil box. Oh, one of my favorite PC game boxes, bar none. But yeah, this featured a fourth episode to the game, The Birth, which included new weapons like the Microwave Expander, and new enemies like the Protector Drone, the Pig Cop Tank, and the Alien Queen.
Fuck the Pig Cop Tank.
It's an excellent addition to the main story and features some of the best levels in the game, and one of the most infamous ending screens ever. Halcyon days indeed. But while 3D Realms was done with Duke Nukem 3D for the time being, third-party developers were all 3D Realms was...
Not to get absolutely morbid on you, but I am pretty sure there were people who were waiting for the sequel who actually died before it came out.
Halcyon days indeed. But while 3D Realms was done with Duke Nukem 3D for the time being, third-party developers were all over it. Expansion packs like Duke Caribbean, Duke It Out in DC, and Nuclear Winter were readily available, as were dozens of others like Duke Extreme, Duke Zone, Duke Assault, Duke the Apocalypse, the Kiloton Collection, Nuke It 1000, Total Meltdown, Beyond the Meltdown, etc., etc. You get the idea.
Good God.
Duke Nukem 3D was a moneymaker for plenty of people beyond those at 3D Realms, which is as sure a sign as any of how hungry people were for more. And man, I haven't even mentioned the multiplayer. The focus of a lot of these unauthorized level packs was the addition of new multiplayer maps. There were two main modes allowing you to do several things over a modem or serial connection, or over the Total Entertainment Network, which was an online service of the time. First up was the co-op campaign mode, which is exactly what it sounds like. Get by with a little help from your friends as you make your way through every level of the story, causing total mayhem along the way and having a hearty chuckle when your co-op buddies blow themselves up. Then there's Deathmatch, or Duke Match as it was called, which is your typical kill or be killed competitive mode. You can play any of the levels from the main campaign, but 3D Realms included a bunch of arena levels designed specifically for this mode as well. And man, this is an absolute blast even today. I mean, it's fast as hell and often devolves into pure chaos, but
big giant
so
clusterfuck.
fun. Things like the Holoduke and laser trip bombs really shine in this mode, since other people are far more susceptible to being caught off guard by them. Although if you just want to play by yourself, there are actually bots in the game you can play against, but it's nothing compared to going online and hunting down live opponents. This is a bit of a pain to set up nowadays in the original version, but if you grab one of the more modern ports of the game like the Megaton Edition, it makes it really easy to do with things like servers and matchmaking. Sadly, the PC version seems to be quite lacking on players nowadays, but if you check it out on consoles or hit up some fan forums, you can almost always find someone down to Duke Match. And you are by no means limited to the Megaton Edition on PC, with the copious amount of digital re-releases, source ports like eDuke 32, enhancement packs like the High Resolution Pack, and the ability to play the original using DOSBox. Dude, I love this game. Duke Nukem 3D, it's just such a great freaking game.
Damn, I'm looking good.
This is one that I instantly recommend to anyone if I hear they haven't played it yet. So that's what I'm gonna do now. If you have not checked out Duke 3D...
What are you waiting for? Christmas?
Yeah, what are you waiting for? Christmas? Alright. It's kind of ironic that some of this ends up, like, rolling.
Don't have time to watch myself. But if you do, you can always watch more, right here on LGR. Lots of Duke Nukem videos, and other things entirely. There's also Twitter and Facebook, and if it's time to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and you're all out of gum, then why not go to Patreon? Those alien bastards won't like that at all. And as always, thank you for watching.
Again, that fucking Duke Nukem impersonation is pretty fucking solid. Like, that is pretty fucking solid. Alright, and the last one, which is ironic because we were talking he showed AOL earlier.
In 1997, the explosion of the World Wide Web was changing the nature of human interaction as we knew it, and America Online was at the forefront. With over half of the entire internet-connected population of the US using AOL to get online, the entire internet-connected population of the US using AOL to get online, the monolithic service seemed unstoppable. But other than the occasional story about how they still have a bizarre number of customers paying out the nose for dial-up these days, you don't hear much about AOL anymore. And seeing as they once formed the largest media company in the world with Time Warner, we're left with the question, what happened? This is LGR Tech Tales, where we take a look at noteworthy stories of technological inspiration, failure, and everything in between. This episode tells the tale of the dial-up service turned multimedia empire, America Online.
Quite fascinating and
The
tragic.
story of AOL picks up in 1988. Quantum Computer Services had been running their own dial-up online service called Quantum Link. This was a highly ambitious but only moderately successful subscription that was sold to Commodore 64 users funded directly by Commodore themselves. But Quantum needed more than moderate success, and their exclusive deal with Commodore just wasn't cutting it. That's because before Quantum Link, their only product was a cartridge for the Atari 2600 called the Game Line in 1982, which let users dial into a server and download games through their console.
Fuck. Just think about that. We've had online downloadable games since the fucking early 80s. Jesus fucking Christ. That's what makes people like me who love physical media feel like it's fucking inevitable that online only is gonna take over. Like, the robots will finally win. Skynet will rain down nuclear fire on our asses, and it'll be fucking game over, man. Game over.
But it was a huge flop and cost.
Actually, the story behind Commodore glitch is actually a lot more complicated than that.
Investors millions of dollars, selling only a small percentage of total units produced. Investors ousted those they deemed responsible at the company, like the co-founder Bill von Meister, and Quantum Link was created for the Commodore 64 as a result, using similar ideas of online connectivity. But the user base for that system was decreasing all the time, and Quantum's cash reserve was dwindling fast, and their debts were piling up. Coincidentally, Apple Computer was also having cash flow problems with their own online service called Apple Link. General Electric's Information Services, or GEIS, provided the server and software back-end for Apple Link, but since it was so expensive, it was only available to company employees and select Apple business partners. It wasn't a public service. Their head of support, John Ebbs, saw the potential for decreasing costs and increasing the effectiveness of customer support through an online service available to the public, and there was talk of reconfiguring Apple Link for this purpose while also providing online services similar to Quantum Link. But it was just downright too expensive to pursue, costing $30 million a year to maintain as it was.
Jesus.
This led Apple to pursue other options, and it led them to Steve Case, vice president over at Quantum, who had been spearheading much of the company's direction since introducing Quantum Link.
God damn.
They reached an agreement to create a home computer version of Apple Link based on the protocols provided by Quantum Link, while also borrowing from a graphical user interface developed by General Electric called Business Talk. While all of this seemed promising, Apple proved to be hard to get along with from the start. Not only did they drag out development time by demanding constant changes to make it fit Apple's strict design language,
Apple being
but they
difficult?
refused Quantum's
No.
suggestions to bundle the software with new computers. Apple also enforced a particular set of limitations on how Quantum could advertise the product, an approach which turned out to be costly and not as effective as what Quantum thought they could do in-house. Eventually, the final result was Apple Link Personal Edition, released in May of 1988 at the San Francisco Apple Fest. The users that actually bought it were impressed with it, but due to the lackluster marketing and the fact that Apple was arguably overcharging for it at up to $15 an hour to use, Apple Link Personal Edition was already being called a flop.
$15 a fucking hour, just let that sink in. $15 in like the 1980s. $15 fucking dollars an hour. Fuck it.
And the existence of Tandy PC Link only added insult to injury from Apple's point of view. And this was a very similar service Quantum had made for Radio
Someone worked
Shack.
that out. Someone do the conversion, like, we'll ballpark it, say 1985. I can't remember what year this came out, but we'll say 1985. Ballpark that and find me what $15 an hour is today.
During the same time for Tandy computers and IBM PC compatibles. Apple blamed Quantum for not working hard enough, and in turn the board of directors at Quantum blamed Steve Case. They wanted him gone. However, Quantum's CEO, Jim Kimsey, was not having any of it. Behind the scenes, he had been prepping Steve Case to take over for him as the head of the company, and he argued that wasting that $5 million they'd spent on Apple Link, and in turn Steve Case's education, would be a huge mistake. The argument worked. Case's job was saved, and they proceeded to set the stage for the future in 1989 by working with their chief technology officer Mark Serif to revisit Apple Link and tweak it into something that was less associated with Apple.
Yeah, you can fuck off paying $38 an hour.
A name meant to imply a larger, more nationwide service for every American. There was some debate about the abbreviation on the other hand. Calling it AO, as seen in their logo, brought up comparisons to BO, and since no one wanted to be associated with body odor, an L was added to the end to become AOL. That was probably for the best. AOL was still a self-contained service, an online walled garden of curated content, but there was plenty to do, like instant messaging, chat rooms, and online gaming with fellow AOL users. The other big draw of America Online was their channel and keyword system, both of which were proudly displayed in advertising. Before the days of widespread audio-visually impressive websites, visiting a channel on AOL was a treat for the senses, many of which were complete with unique branding for whatever their product was, and typing in simple keywords made it easy to find these channels without having to type in a long address. The program also supported sound, and AOL 1.0 was the first time people heard this when signing on.
Welcome. You've got mail.
That friendly voice alone made getting online worthwhile. It also had a game called Quantum Space that users could play, which was the first fully automated play-by-email video game developed by Stormfront Studios. And after convincing Steve Case it was technically feasible, Stormfront made another game exclusively for AOL subscribers in 1991, Neverwinter Nights, co-developed with TSR and SSI, using their Gold Box engine for Dungeons & Dragons games. It was the first massively multiplayer online role-playing game to feature graphics, not just text, and allowed up to 50 players to play together in each server.
Yeah,
Neverwinter Nights paired nicely with the first version of AOL for MS-DOS PCs in 1991, which is a platform that had quite a large user base with SSI's existing Gold Box role-playing games. By 1992, they had over 150,000 subscribers for America Online, and along with the introduction of the first version of AOL for Windows, they decided to take the company public, raising $66 million in the process.
Damn.
Shortly after this, Steve Case was made the CEO of the company, now named America Online Incorporated, with Jim Kimsey taking the seat of chairman of the company. Oddly enough, this was the second time Case had been named CEO since it happened briefly back in 1991, but he was soon stripped of the title after the board decided he looked too young for a company about to go public on the stock market.
Dude looks older than I am.
Now that they had tons of cash, Case was reinstated and quickly got to work on the next big thing for AOL, and that thing was a ludicrous number of floppy disks. You see, AOL had a steady cash flow, but they needed new users if they ever hoped to surpass the likes of competing services like Prodigy and CompuServe. Enter Jan Brandt, AOL's head of marketing, starting in April of 1993. The success of the latest release of the children's book Corduroy was the result of her work at Newfield Publications, where under her direction they had sent out free copies of the book to prospective customers. It had worked brilliantly and they made back their money in no time because people just needed to be made aware of it. So why not try it with America Online? Up to that point, online service providers sold the software in stores and perhaps bundled it with a new computer purchase. But giving it away completely for free, that was ballsy. Steve Case was hesitant at first, but ended up giving Brandt a budget of around $250,000 to try out the idea. And it's less than it sounds like too, since the cost of producing each floppy disk alone was $1.09, and they still had packaging and postage costs after that. They figured 1% of users trying out the disk from this campaign would be a good result, but when nearly 10% signed up as soon as they got the disk in hand, AOL knew they'd struck gold. Before long, AOL floppy disks and CD-ROMs were showing up absolutely everywhere. Mailboxes, magazines, bookstores, Blockbusters, and even in packages of frozen Omaha steaks. And yes, the disks survived being frozen just fine. At their peak, half of all CDs
He's not kidding about that, by the way. I'd just like to point out, he's not fucking kidding about them being packaged with steaks.
Bookstores,
That's legit.
Blockbusters, and even in packages of frozen Omaha steaks. And yes, the discs survived being frozen just fine. At their peak, half of all CDs produced worldwide were for America Online alone. This disc marketing campaign was so successful that soon multiple suitors were lined up, ready to partner with AOL, including Microsoft's Bill Gates, who invited Steve Case and Jim Kimsey out to Redmond to meet with him. There was talk of a partnership and even a few murmurs of an acquisition, but Case was adamantly against the idea. The meeting went so badly that afterward, Gates said to an associate that AOL is a total waste of time, don't bother. And so Gates and his team began working on what would become Internet Explorer and the Microsoft Network instead. And that is a tale for another day.
Remember MSN?
Whatever, this was fine by the folks at AOL because things were really taking off. In 1993, they introduced several new features: personal @AOL.com email addresses for every subscriber, access to the vast Usenet distributed discussion system, and an exciting new network, the World Wide Web. Yes, the internet was finally available on AOL. Browsers like NCSA Mosaic and later Netscape Navigator were making internet usage easier all the time, so it only made sense for AOL to include their own access. By late 1994, they had discontinued Q-Link and PC-Link entirely to focus on America Online exclusively, and combined with the introduction of internet advertising within AOL services, making them tons of cash, it was clear that the web was the future. AOL.com debuted in 1995, acting as a starting point web directory for net surfers everywhere, a vital thing in the days before widespread search engines. 1996 was also the year that, with over 5 million monthly subscribers, they introduced flat-rate, unlimited-use subscription plans, as well as generous amounts of free hours available if you just signed up. They followed this up by adding buddy lists so users could easily find each other, and the iconic Running Man logo, both of which led to the creation of AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM, in 1997. And finally, they got over their differences and reached an agreement with Microsoft to bundle America Online software in every copy of Windows for 5 years. All of this ended up making them so successful so fast that people were signing up to the service once every 6 seconds, and users were constantly getting busy signals when signing in as a result.
That was a problem.
Remember, this was all still dial-up, so if the local AOL phone line was used up, then tough luck, you had to try another one or wait it out. But even with thousands of frustrated cancellations occurring, AOL grew to over 10 million users, and the money was coming in faster than they could spend it. So begins a string of mergers and acquisitions, starting by taking out their old rivals. First up was the purchase of eWorld in 1997, a short-lived online service by Apple meant to be a replacement for Apple Link. This was followed up by the purchase of none other than CompuServe in 1998, along with the instant messaging service ICQ, two of the main competitors to America Online and AIM. MoviePhone was another big purchase, once a pioneering automated phone service that had turned into a huge website for looking up movie listings and information. And to top it all off, then came the Netscape acquisition, which was absolutely massive at $4.2 billion. Netscape Navigator was the dominant browser for years, but with Microsoft's Internet Explorer gaining so much ground from being part of Windows, they were on the verge of bankruptcy and were forced to sell.
In the damn 90s.
By this point, America Online seemed truly unstoppable. With tens of millions of users internationally, a value of $125 billion, and devouring so much of their competition so quickly, it was only a matter of time before they either became the biggest company in the world or imploded in violent fashion. But hey, why not both? In the year 2000, AOL made the announcement. They were buying Time Warner, and the two giants would merge.
Now, if anybody knows if anybody here is a wrestling fan, you will know that it is this merger that effectively killed WCW.
In case you're not familiar, Time Warner was, and still is, one of the single biggest media companies around, originally a conglomeration of Time Incorporated and Warner Communications. teaming up with America Online created the largest media company in the world at the time, taking on the name AOL Time Warner. With their powers combined, it had to be a sure success, right? Well, say hello.
Now, we talk, like, WCW was losing money, and this was on Time Warner's television network. They were losing money yearly. It's a fucking drop in a fucking ocean. It is a drop in the fucking ocean with how much they're about to lose on this.
Hello to the dot-com bubble, a phenomenon that occurred when the web market grew to such extremes that it had to burst. And burst it did, right around the time of the AOL Time Warner deal, with billions of dollars being lost by countless web-based businesses, leading to a major recession in the United States and Europe. This was also during a time that websites were getting more advanced and dial-up remained just as slow, and users were starting to jump ship to broadband internet services, something that AOL did not yet provide. Combined with the fact that the corporate cultures of AOL and Time Warner just didn't mesh at all, and online advertising rates were rapidly falling across the board due to the bubble bursting, and the deal was doomed from the start. AOL Time Warner's stock price was annihilated by 2002. After reporting the biggest annual corporate loss.
Look at that fucking number. Look at that fucking number. That's how much this merger lost them. That's with a B. That's with a fucking B.
In history, falling from $226 billion all the way down to $20 billion, the chief executive went from two. After reporting the biggest annual corporate loss in history, falling from $226 billion all the way down to $20 billion, the chief executive of Time Warner resigned, and Steve Case himself followed suit a year later. And as a big rotten cherry on top, the U.S. Justice Department began an investigation into America Online during all of this for accounting fraud, accusing them of inflating reported ad revenue. The suit was settled in 2004, and they paid a $510 million penalty for advertising accounting fraud. Somewhat ironically, 2004 was also the year that AOL acquired the website advertising.com, so that was a thing. With all the hoopla, another rebranding was long overdue. America Online took on the name AOL, which made sense seeing as everyone called them that anyway. And with it came quite a few changes over the next few years, like laying off 40% of their workforce and moving their corporate headquarters from Dulles, Virginia to New York City to be closer to their ad partners. They also made AOL Email, Instant Messenger, and most of their web services free to anyone with an internet connection, since their AOL high-speed broadband service bundle was a bust, being discontinued in 2004.
They were too slow to it.
It had failed to attract customers since AOL relied on local telecom companies for DSL connections, and since phone and cable companies often bundled DSL with other services and undercut AOL, there was little incentive to pay for their services on top of that. Then, in 2008, came another short-sighted decision, in retrospect at least. Bebo.com.
Bebo!
Social media was becoming a big deal, with sites like Friendster and MySpace setting the stage for sites like Bebo. And Bebo was no slouch at the time, surpassing MySpace and Facebook in total users in certain countries. AOL Time Warner acquired Bebo for $850 million, which seemed like a bargain compared to the valuation of MySpace at the time at $15 billion. Suffice to say, the actual value of services like Bebo would prove to be vastly overestimated, and Bebo filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy several years later. After all that, it was time to rebrand once more in 2009, this time stylizing AOL as AOL, period. Not only that, but Time Warner split, leaving AOL to do their own thing as an independent company again. And now under the direction of ex-Googler Tim Armstrong, AOL all but left behind its past as an internet service provider and embraced the new world of new media. They ended up acquiring several companies and websites in this area, like Patch Media, Weblogs Incorporated, TechCrunch, and the Huffington Post, among many others.
Yeah, AOL owns fucking Washington Post.
Also won the affections of Verizon Communications in 2015, who decided to purchase AOL outright at $50 a share, a deal worth $4.4 billion. Since then, AOL has continued focusing on its advertising and media production businesses, purchasing Millennial Media in 2015 and virtual reality studio Riot a year later. And in June 2016, Verizon announced its intentions to purchase the core internet business of Yahoo, with the plan being to merge AOL and Yahoo together. Oh, it seems kind of appropriate, really, although there's no telling how that'll turn out. As for the company's patriarchs these days, Mark Serif retired from AOL in 1996 and went on to direct companies like IntelliHome and US Online Communications, and also formed the Serif Foundation as a philanthropic effort. Jim Kimsey retired from AOL in 1995, going on to serve as chairman of Refugees International, while also working with the private security firm Triple Canopy. He unfortunately passed away on March 1, 2016, at age 76 after a battle with cancer. Steve Case stayed on the Time Warner board of directors until 2005, when he left to spend more time working on his investment firm Revolution LLC, and is also currently working with politicians to advance immigration reform, with his argument being that immigration is necessary for America's future economic success. And sadly, the fate of Bill von Meister is pretty tragic. After being ousted from his company in 1985, just before they introduced Quantum Link, Bill was involved with 9 more startups over the next 10 years, but he didn't stay at any of them for more than a year or two. He died in 1995 from cancer at the age of 53, broke and in debt, with nothing much to show for all of his efforts except a plaque at the Palm restaurant in Washington, D.C., and that was seemingly because he bought more vintage scotch there than anyone else. When Steve Case spoke at a memorial service for Bill, he opened with, "Without Bill von Meister, there would have been no America Online." Indeed, without a long string of crazy ideas, huge failures, and total shots in the dark, America Online would have never been a thing. It could have been any number of online services that introduced the masses to the idea of chat rooms, online gaming, cyber sex, forwards from grandma, and free frisbees and drink coasters. But for millions around the world, it was AOL that accomplished all of this and more. Whether you have any nostalgia for them or not, there is no questioning the huge impact that Quantum Link and America Online had on the world of online communication.
Yeah. And
if you enjoyed this episode of LGR Tech Tales, be sure to check out the predecessor to this episode, the creation of Quantum Link and all the game line stuff. It's fascinating. And as always, thank you very much for watching.
So yeah, like I said, if you're not... I just wanted... These were the 4 videos I decided highlighted why I'm actually subscribed to LGR. Because he does fantastic work. Now, he's not a small channel by any means. He's got 1.5 million subscribers, but it still surprises me for a lot of tech heads out there who like this kind of obscure, interesting shit that don't actually know about him. So go and check out LGR and subscribe if you're not, because he's done a lot of fucking videos. Like, he's done a video about the Gizmondo. He did one about the Y2K. He even did one about fuck's sake. There was if anybody remembers the Apple all-in-one computer that looked like a fucking TV from the early 2000s or from 1999 that was then ripped off by E-Machines and they fucking sued them into pretty much oblivion. He's done a video on that. Like, he's done so many fantastic goddamn videos on such interesting stuff. Pretty goddamn much, but he's more physical. Like, LGR is definitely more physical because he, like I said, with some of the stuff, you actually see him making it as well, or building it, or showing it, or both. Alright guys, but that is going to do it for today's Let's Appreciate. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see all of you next week for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Oh, good Lord Almighty, that's going to be fun. So please, take care everybody. Have a good weekend.